What's going on, everyone, and welcome back to Jam with Jock. Today I'm going to share with you guys 5 Ableton techniques that I think not enough producers know, and I guarantee these techniques will elevate not only your production skills but your production efficiency. So let's not waste any time and we'll jump straight into Ableton. The first technique we're going to be looking at today is automation, and more importantly, how to use it in a more efficient way. Ableton has a great feature where you can insert shapes to your automation lanes. So for instance, I'll have this drum groove I've got here, and if I want to try and create a build-up effect before a drop, I can just throw a filter on, and then if I insert the shape right before the drop happens, choose this shape here, you'll see it automatically creates this wave for me. So instead of having to draw it in, I've just inserted this shape quickly. And then now I've got this auto filter build up that is going to emphasize that drop. Now we've got all different shapes that we can use. I think some of these complex shapes can be really great for some modulation. So I have on my sends and return channel in my default set this grain delay. And so I often use this in my loops to try and just create a few textures. So if I go ahead and click on the last return track, which is this grain delay effect here, I'll just insert any random shape. And for this type of grain delay, the more random, the better. So I'll just click on sine wave. And if we listen to the loop now, so by simply right clicking and clicking on a shape, I've made this complex modulation rhythm for my grain delay. If you notice, some of these automation lines are curved and straight. So if you ever wanted to curve a rhythm, say you wanted to slowly build up something, you just hold Option and then you get that curve symbol come up and then you just drag up or down. And so this creates for a much more natural sounding modulation because we can slowly fade the modulation in or out. If you ever wanted to copy some automation lanes, it's much easier to click on this plus sign here. And then this opens the lane for you. So you can have multiple different lanes. So say I've got my distortion unit, I've got this here now in this lane, the oven, that's the power on and off button. And then for my mixer, I've got that grain delay. So you can have all different automation lanes. So this is a great way to see all your different channels, but it's also a great way to copy automation. So if I didn't want to copy the audio that's on this channel and I wanted to just copy the automation lane, I'm just going to simply open this lane up by pressing on the plus symbol. And then I'm going to highlight that section and then just paste it anywhere. So it makes it so much easier to just copy the automation and not the actual audio file or MIDI file that you have. And there's also times that you have a section of your track that you have maybe high passed or you have some sort of an automation going on and you want to copy the MIDI or the audio file for that track, but you don't want that automation to follow. What you'll do is you just press this locked button, all right? So if I did this at the moment, if I duplicated this across, the automation would follow. If I press this locked button up here, and then I duplicate this, I'm not going to get that automation. So I find this extremely useful when I'm arranging my track and I have the same sounds in different parts of the song, but with automations that I want at a particular time and when I don't. And so by locking this, I can copy the sound and not the automation, which is extremely useful. Next up, we have the single biggest time-saving technique that I've found in my own productions that I've actually only discovered this year alone, and that is having a default audio or MIDI track. So what I mean by this, if I open up an audio track, you'll notice that it starts at -12. Now, every time in the past, every time I opened an audio or MIDI track, I was constantly having to turn it down. So having the audio and MIDI channels start at -12 has just saved me so much time. So to do this, you just insert a MIDI track, and then you just set whatever default settings you want. So you could have any volume that you want. You could have any effect on, whatever you like, and you just right click it and then choose save as default audio track. And the same goes for MIDI. So when you're doing the MIDI though, you have to have some sort of a sound on. So just say I've thrown on this grand piano, you'll see my MIDI come straight to -12. So throw some sort of an instrument on. And if you don't want that instrument to be saved in your default MIDI set, then just go ahead and set your volume. Delete the instrument so that's not saved in it also, and then go ahead and save as default MIDI track. And so now when I open up a MIDI track, throw an instrument on, I'm now at -12 dB. You can also do this with audio effects too. So I have my EQ set with a high pass filter all the time. And for me, this was always the setting that I would go to straight away to take out some of the lows. So to have this open every time I open an EQ, it saved me so much time. And it's the same concept with the channel faders. You just put the setting to your desire, right click, save as default preset. You can also create audio effect racks and then save that as the default preset. So I have this awesome lead that I like to use, which all of this stuff will be saved in your user library. So I've got this lead here. It opens up my VST for me. It's got the EQ on it. It's got the reverb on it. It's got the auto pan on it. All of these effects that I saved in my audio effect rack, everything's ready to go. So if you have a go-to sound and effects that you like to have on, maybe you have your go-to vocal effect chain, or you have a go-to compression effect track that you like to use, all you have to do is just simply put the effects that you want. So maybe you want a compressor, maybe you want an EQ, maybe you want some distortion, some reverb. All I'm going to do is highlight all of them, Command G, and then I can rename this what I like when I press this save button here. And then I might type in the effect chain that I want to call it. And now every time this is right there. And the good thing about these is you can also favorite these in your collections. So if you see here, I've got this one here, a nice synth effect that I like to use. So I've put that into my favorite sample section. And then here it is. I've got this nice effect chain. All I have to do is drag on here. I've got the exact echo that I want. I've got the filter I want. Everything I want is all there. So with the audio channels being set to where I want, and to have these default EQs and these audio racks that have all my favorite settings on them, it's just a very efficient way to work. And I would highly suggest you find out what you like to use and what you find yourself using a lot of the time, and then just going ahead and saving it as either a default set or in an effect chain like I've done here. Often when I'm arranging a track, I love to have some certain key selections that help me just turn off and on things with the press of a button, and it just makes for a much more smooth workflow because I can just be listening to the track on full and press a button to turn an effect on. So let's say, for instance, I want this bass to be high passed. So I've got this high pass that's turned on here. I'll press key and then I'll touch the button that I want to affect. So I want the off button to be turned on. And then I'm going to press whatever key you want. I like doing the numbers, so I'll just do the number 1 at the moment. And then I'll just hit that key button again to turn it off. And so now every time I press the number 1, I've got this effect unit turning off and on. Let's just, before the lead comes in, I might want to take this bass out, those lower frequencies, and have this high pass filter come on. So I'll have it off for the moment to let the bass play through. High pass on by pressing number 1. Back on. So if you're arranging a track live and you have all these different key selections that you can use, you can almost be playing the track live by having all these different effects be turned on and off. And what you can also do is you can also save these key selections to your default template. So if I have a template for when I'm making electronic music, so for that I have the kick selected number 1, I have the snare number 2, and I also have those effects on as well in 3 and 4. So knowing that when I'm in that template, I can just turn the kick off at any time to hear what maybe a breakdown would sound like without the kick drum, or a high pass filter with that bass. You can just have that in your default set, and it's an extremely efficient way to work. So if you haven't ever created a template, you just go into File, and you can go Save Live Set as a template. And so I've got all different kinds of templates here. I've got an arrangement view one, I've got a main one, I have a minimalist one. You can also then select your go-to favorite one as your default set. So having all of these settings set up as a default set, maybe your go-to settings that you like to use, I would definitely recommend having some key selections on things you would like to try and implement turning off and on. And then by having that as a default set every time you open Ableton, that's what you got. Have you ever recorded in something live, or you've just been playing around with your MIDI keyboard and then you realized, shit, I wasn't pressing record? So if you go up to this button here, this actually is a capture mode. So it plays whatever you last played and it captures that. So for instance, let's just say I was just jamming along here with this pad in the background. I've got the lead playing. And I'm like, oh, that sounded really good and I can't play that again. Just go ahead and press capture here. And now it takes that last sequence that you just played and it captures that and then puts it in as a MIDI for me. So if you ever create one of those happy accidents where you just make a sound that you just didn't know how you created it and you thought it sounded really good, then definitely use this feature. Track delay. I can't tell you how many times if I used an external synthesizer or even some plugins and there was some sort of a delay, and it's extremely frustrating to have your sounds not be playing when you want them to. So for instance, this ample guitar plugin, I always need to have with a pre-delay on. So to turn on the pre-delay, press the bottom right here and then press track options. I'm just going to turn my return tracks off. So by pressing track options, this track delay section is going to come up. And I'll just take it off so you can hear exactly what the plugin would sound like without it. It's just way off the grid. And you know, I've talked a lot about on this channel, I like things not to be exactly on the grid, a bit swung, but in this case, it's way too delayed. So what I've done is I found that -50 was a nice track delay to use. So it's starting at -50 milliseconds before the track starts. And so that's just helping it be on sync with the rest of the track. So if you have an external synthesizer or even some plugins that for whatever reason aren't in sync with the rest of your tracks and have that delay, then go straight to your track options, turn on your track delay and just fiddle around with what sounds good. And then just have that remembered for future reference that, you know, for me, I know whenever I'm using ample guitar, I need to set my track delay to -50. So there you have it. There's 5 Ableton techniques that I think is seriously going to improve your efficiency when producing. And we all know that when we sit down and make music, we want things to flow. And by having my EQ set up in that default set, or whether I have my channel faders set at -12 straight away, I'm able to then just make music as fast as possible. And I want to try and get in that flowed state every time I create music. And by implementing these same techniques into your own productions, you guys are going to have that same effect in your own work. If you learned something in this video, I'd much appreciate it if you could hit that like and subscribe button. And thanks so much for staying to the end of the video. If there's any questions you had about these techniques, I'd be happy to get back to you. Just drop them down below. If you wanted to go ahead and keep watching my stuff, then I'll put my latest upload just up there. Until then, I'll see you guys in the next one.